Hello everyone and welcome to The Information, where you get all the information on the latest in electronic, indie pop, experimental music, and more. Today we have an album review. We're reviewing the new James Blake record, Assume Form. For those unfamiliar, James Blake is a London, UK-based electronic producer and singer-songwriter. He first came onto the scene in 2010 when he released a series of EPs that got quite a bit of attention on some blogs. More specifically, the trio of EPs, The Bells Sketch, CMYK, and Clavier Work, respectively. Those three EPs all prefaced his debut album, which was released the following year in 2011 to much acclaim. He's since dropped 3 albums, Overgrown in 2013, The Color in Anything in 2016, and now this new record, Assume Form, back in January of this year. This new record of Blake's is quite an interesting change of pace. Instrumentally, we're seeing him include more trap rap inspired productions, with guest production by Metro Boomin on this record, and also another guest collaboration with Rosalia. James Blake comes across much happier on this new record, and it would easily be described as a love record. Most of the songs on this record do concern the relationship he's been in since 2015 with the Good Place actress Jameela Jamil. It certainly is nice to hear James being happy on record for once, rather than making cold, icy, and calculated, often emotionless electronic and dance music. That being said, the album proper does take a little bit to get going, with the unfortunately half-baked song Assume Form, which ironically never really does truly assume form. There's a warped piano passage that kind of gets looped throughout most of the song, and the beat itself is kind of lazy with just some hi-hats and a basic clap. I also wasn't a really big fan of the high-pitched vocal that is kind of looped again towards the back half of the track, though I did like it towards the end when James Blake does hop on and sort of harmonize over top of that high-pitched vocal. It certainly ends the song on a much stronger note than when it began. Following that is the first of 2 songs featuring production from Metropolitan Booming, the first being Mile High, which also features Travis Scott on vocals. I just found it to be a pretty straightforward, atmospheric trap song. The chorus is fairly catchy, but overall the tune and the contributions from both Travis and James are a little too low-key to really stand out too much. Travis basically dominates the first half vocally with a couple of verses and the chorus, obviously, and James kind of hops on in the second half with a sort of semi-spoken word rap verse of his own. It's certainly somewhat different territory for James, but ultimately, like I said, I don't think it does a lot to really stand out. The third track on here, Tell Them, which also features Metro Boomin on production, works a lot better, I feel. The beat, technically speaking, is much more intricate and a lot busier, and Moses Sumney's vocal contribution sounds much more at home here. I love Moses' twisted, high-pitched vocal delivery that's kind of squeaky as well. It's engaging and complements the dark trap instrumentation quite well. The next song, Into the Red, does take a minute or so to get going, but once the plinking arpeggio gets introduced, it becomes a lot more interesting, especially melodically, and I love the part when Blake introduces his Gold Rush refrain. The chords from this point on are very romantic, and I love the strings that get introduced around this part as well. It's pretty much from this moment on in the rest of the record that it really takes a turning point and becomes kind of like full-on love songs. Unfortunately, this is where the record really shines most for me. The next track is the aforementioned Rosalia collab, Barefoot in the Park. For me, this was a very unexpected but also very awesome collaboration. Instrumentally, it's a bit sparse and minimal, which obviously is somewhat James's style if you're familiar with his previous works at all, but I do like the instrumentation and vocal deliveries of both the artists. It's very sensual, especially once the two duet during the chorus. I do feel though that compositionally, since the track is so minimal, instrumentally speaking, it doesn't really evolve or move very much from where it starts to where it ends, though I do like the stuttery, reverbed, metallic percussion that's throughout the track. Really though, that's just nitpicking, and I feel like the main price of admission for this track is hearing James sing a passage in Spanish. That was definitely one of the many highlights of the record for me. As was the next track, Can't Believe the Way We Flow. This is another beautiful track that's built around a soulful, vintage sample. James's vocal melodies, especially the way he sings the title of the track so gracefully, they're a real highlight as well. Also, the lyrics are pure adulation, with him singing "I could have used you in the early days," referring to his wife Jameela. I will say sort of the slowed down section in the midway point does kind of suck some of the momentum out of the track, but it does kick back in towards the latter end, so fortunately it doesn't affect the track too much. With the following track, Are You in Love? This was one that didn't really catch my attention right away. It kind of grew on me a little bit as I listened to the record more and more. The chords, especially on the intro part of the track, reminded me a lot of his earlier EPs, the attack on the synths being super prominent and punchy. The beat, much like on Barefoot in the Park, is somewhat minimalistic, and at times the track almost feels like it could serve as sort of an interlude of sorts, though the vocal melodies, especially during the chorus, are quite catchy. I just really like how he sings the "Are you in love?" Lyrically, James here is a little bit more insecure. He's singing a lot about needing reminders of love from his significant other. He needs to know that they are actually indeed in love with him, and a really nice moment on this song, much like Assume Form, is the very end, the last 20-30 seconds or so. James does a tremendous vocal run, which is accompanied by some stirring strings and a gorgeous descending woodwind melody to fade the song out. Though I feel that these last 20 seconds or so, the instrumentation, it really could have benefited the rest of the track as well. I'm not sure why it only showed up towards the end, but it was still a very nice moment. For me, the best song on the record was Where's the Catch, which features Andre 3000 on a verse. I like the deep 808 kicks on the song, as well as the chopped up contemplative piano loop, and of course the legendary rap verse from Andre 3000 himself. His contribution is more stacked than a library, with wordplay, puns, double meanings. It's really just jaw-dropping. Fortunately, James also brings his A-game as well, with a completely wild vocal performance, with some voice-modulated passages, including the "Alright now" and "There must be a catch." Not to mention in general just how much this beat slaps. No faults on this song, everything on this track is great. James follows that up with another highlight, I'll Come Too. This is another truly gorgeous song, aided in no small part by the amorous, elegant retro sample from Bruno Nicolai's La Contessa Incontro. It gives the song a nostalgic and classic yet contemporary feel, and the lyrics here are James in true love form. Some of the standout lines are, "I wouldn't do this on my own, but I'm not on my own tonight." I especially love the production choice when the beat drops out, as he says, "on my own tonight." It really gives the lines that much more impact. I also love when the strings come in during the final minute and really gives the song an even more romantic aesthetic. Lyrically, I'm loving the personal growth that James is showing in this song. He talks about how his wife is helping him become a better person, especially on lines like, "You don't care what they think, I'm getting there, I can get there too." And choosing to end the song on the final, "But I'm not on my own tonight," and the way it perfectly resolves is just such a satisfying feeling. It really makes the song so much more impactful. I also like the following track, Power On. This track nicely complements the themes of personal growth from the previous song. Here James is coming to terms with all the things he thought he knew before getting into this relationship, and now his perspective has kind of shifted, especially on lines like, "From space I could see that I was wrong." Here James is able to perfectly describe what it's like being in love and how much fun it is, especially on lines like, "Let's go home and talk shit about everyone." The production is also pretty great here. I like a lot of the subtle low-pass filters and the lovely melodies as well. On Don't Miss It, the vibe gets turned down a little bit. This one was an early single that prefaced the release of the record, and it's a powerful statement on the realities of depression and anxiety, and just in general that feeling of when you hold yourself up to avoid things that James describes in the song, like talking about waiting in lines or driving on the freeway or going out of your way to avoid talking to people. The song does take a more positive yet still cautionary direction in the second half, with some beautiful Radiohead-inspired piano chords, as James pleads to those who may suffer from similar mental health conditions that he does about trying not to miss life or romanticizing feelings of depression or anxiety. He urges the listener to try to be present in the moment, which is something that I think we all need to remind ourselves to do every now and then. On the final track, Lullaby for My Insomniac, we are treated to some music here that reminds me a little bit of the soundtrack of the theater scene of the movie Donnie Darko. I get that vibe mostly with the song's insistent vocal drones and the slightly creepy nocturnal vibe. Even on this mostly skeletal track, James still turns it into a love song, sort of framing the lyrics saying that he would enjoy staying up with his insomniac lover instead of turning over and going to sleep as a sort of romantic and supportive gesture. Ultimately, it's still pretty sparse and not the most memorable song to fade the album out on, but it still does tie in thematically with the rest of the record and is quite atmospheric and hypnotic. I think overall, is this James's best record? Not really. I would still have to give that to the experimental, innovative, and forward-thinking self-titled album, but as I said in the beginning of my review, I feel like this is definitely an album where you can tell he's evolved his sound quite a bit since then. I think as a love album, Assume Form is very effective and evocative, and doesn't retain the problems that dragged down his overstuffed last record, The Color in Anything. That being said, I still do wish the album kicked off a little bit quicker, I feel like it's kind of bookended by the weakest songs on the record as well, but for the majority of the record, it's still quite an enrapturing listen. I'd have no problem giving this thing a decent to strong 7. Let me know what you guys thought about the new James Blake record, Assume Form. Did you think I was on the mark, or did I miss the mark? Do you have a favorite or least favorite song? Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as always, thank you for watching The Information.